How are you doing today? A new episode of Horror Stories? With us today is the completion of the rest of the parts of the story of the Summons from Another World with you, Jamal. Before we start telling the story, we return to a reminder of the events of the story. They are the first game, which is the Japanese game, Darumasan. The second game is the Midnight game. And now I complete the rest of the story, which is the third part of the game, which is the Elevator game. Gentlemen, do not be surprised by the name of the game, as most of us are sure that everything is suitable to be a portal to summon the underworld through. The Elevator game is characterized by being one of the greatest places used to summon the otherworld. In terms of this game, one careful search for a 10-story building, and it must be empty, deserted, inhabited by no human being. 2. The building has an elevator. 3. The person climbs on board the elevator and initially presses the 4th floor, and when the elevator reaches the 4th floor, the person must not come down from it, and he must go down to the 2nd floor. Get out of the elevator, and then go down to the 5th floor. For these verbs with elevator rolls are a talisman that summons the beings of the underworld, and the numbers are as follows: 426,105. 5. On the 5th floor, the elevator door opens and the player sees a very beautiful girl in front of him. 6. The player must ignore this little girl, and in particular and a special warning, the player must not look into the eyes of the little girl. 7. The player avoids the girl completely, and goes down to the first round. 8. And no matter how much the player tries to go down the elevator to the 1st floor, he will not go down and will automatically ascend to the 10th floor. 9. In order to avoid the disaster that the player put himself in, he must press any button so that the elevator does not reach the 10th floor, and if the player succeeds in this step, the game will end permanently, and the player will continue his life after that. 10. In the event that the player wants to complete the game and know the bonus, you have to complete the 10th floor, and there the elevator door will open on the 10th floor, and the player will find a very dark world in front of him, as if the elevator took the player to a world other than the world we are accustomed to. 11. At this moment, the player is pulled on his face to the other world, and there is no chance of surviving this game unless the player is fixed on his position in the elevator, and repeats the steps he did, but in reverse. And whoever reaches this stage, it will be very difficult for the player to continue his life after this point normally again. 12. In the event that fear and anxiety appear on the player, there will be no way or one way out of the elevator permanently. 13. I tried this game, the bumper game, from many curious people around the world, and what succeeded among them, he wrote down his victory and his experience, but they were also suffering from psychological and physical disorders. Panic, visual and auditory hallucinations, barely able to sleep until they freak out over life's worst terrifying nightmares. 14. The game has many videos on foreign websites titled Elevator Survivors, and the filmmakers have taken advantage of this phenomenon, and in many of their films the elevator appeared and raced it with intimidation, horror, excitement, and the appearance of beings from the other world who were summoned through it or appeared in it. A message from a survivor of the elevator game to summon the other world. A young man named Alex tells that once he was searching YouTube clips for funny situations in elevators around the world, and he followed many clips, watched and enjoyed them until he found in front of his eyes a video with content about the Korean elevator game. Alex was drawn to the title of the clip, and finally found his desire and love to know even a little bit about the dark world, so he watched the clip carefully and wrote down all the information and instructions that came to him. Alex had made his decision that he finally had the opportunity to take a look at the world of the yin, and indeed Alex chose the appropriate building to start the game. He decided to start the experiment at night, after everyone had gone to sleep and wanted no one to notice. Alex began to literally carry out the instructions. The elevator door opened automatically on the 5th floor, but no one was waiting for him, as in the video he had seen. But at the last moment he caught a glimpse of the little girl, so beautiful, as he mentioned, and she hastened and came with me in the elevator. I only felt horror and panic inside me. I tried hard to hide my feelings and I avoided looking at them completely. I tried with all my energy to make the elevator go down to the 1st floor as instructed, but I failed in that, and the elevator took us to the 10th floor despite all my attempts to press all the buttons, but she did not respond. The elevator reached us for the 10th floor and opened by itself. I had the paper at that time, and I had written the numbers of the floors in reverse. I was sure then that my chance of survival was weak and almost non-existent. The elevator buttons did not respond again, and I could not resist my curiosity. I understood walking outside the elevator, and at this moment I heard a sharp voice asking me, "Where are you going?" I knew at that time the necessity of not looking at the girl in the elevator, but at that time I felt that my will was robbed from me, so I found myself turning to her and looking against my will. In addition to her eyes that looked closely, her eyes were very blue, and there were black tears flowing from them. She had a broken nose and very white lips. She looked like a dead, and she was wearing nothing on her feet. As for her nails were at its ugliest. It was too long and too filthy to handle. The elevator door closed suddenly, and I heard the loudest, groggy laugh I had ever heard in my life. A voice that made me panicked inside me and could not control my nerves after that. Fires burning, and the more I focused, the more I grieved for disasters. I found people tied up and burning with them. I smelled the smell of their burning bodies. It was a fairy scene that I will not be able to forget for the rest of my life. I saw from afar the elevator, so I decided to take another attempt to survive my life and get rid of the horrors that I see all around me. I pressed the elevator call button, and indeed the elevator arrived, and when I opened the door I found it full of dead bodies. Bodies were on top of each other. I pressed myself and stood among these bodies inside the elevator. I repeated the steps in reverse, hoping for a salvation from all these horrors, and indeed the elevator began to take me down, but he was standing on every floor and opening the door, so I saw the child in front of me, but in her frightening form, staring at me, and finally the elevator reached me to the ground floor, and it is strange that I did not find any of the employees in it, so I did not care about anything but that I ran towards my house, entered my bedroom and closed the door behind me. I sat on my bed in my own home, shivering with fear, and I dared not turn off the lights behind me or close my eyes, and if someone was knocking on the transparent window glass, I did not see anyone's hand, but I could hear the chimes very accurately. Until the moment Alex wrote his story, he was saying that the sound of the child's laughter did not leave him, neither in his sleep nor in his wakefulness, and the sound of torture did not leave him either in his sleep or in his wakefulness, and his only hope of survival was to obtain death sooner rather than later. And here our story ends today, and I see you next time with the rest of the story from the summoning from another world. To the next time with you, Jamal.